This is a response to the discussing atheism and breaking it down regarding the false dichotomy between atheism and theism. Um, I don't even know where to start, but basically I'm going to say that I agree that there is a false dichotomy between what people perceive a false dichotomy between atheism and theism, but I've never heard somebody acknowledge that there's a false dichotomy and then try to clear up the issue with an even bigger false dichotomy. The idea that a hardline atheist couldn't be altruistic is absurd to me, and so it would almost be insulting if I cared enough about your opinion. I mean, I'm replying to it, but I mean, I'm not going to take it personally because I don't have any invested emotional interest in your opinion. It's not like my mother's telling me this or a really good friend or anything like that. So it would almost be insulting if I cared enough. But no, the idea that you either have to be a hardline atheist who is very sure about the nature of a supernatural creator being, and being altruistic is ridiculous. I am a hardline atheist. I mean, I disagree with you that hardline atheists could be presented with rational evidence of the existence of God and would still reject it. You probably believe that because you think there is rational, empirical, irrefutable evidence that we must have seen and we have rejected. And that's not the case. That's just there is no evidence of the existence of God. That's why we reject it. But it is if an omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, benevolent being existed, surely he would have the power to convince me of his existence. It's not like it's beyond his power to prove himself to me. So it's not like it's not possible for this evidence to exist. Of course, according to dogma, he doesn't want to prove his existence, because he wants faith, but that's besides the point. The idea that we would reject real evidence is ridiculous. The entire reason we don't believe in God is based on the whole evidence issue. There is no evidence. That's why we don't believe, and we don't take the position that we have to find evidence of his non-existing before we can believe. We're saying that the idea of God is so outrageous that it demands evidence. It's like, saying that there are unicorns in the sky. I'm not going to believe that unless you can prove that it's not true. I'm not going to believe that until you can prove that it is true. So the evidence issue is the entire reason. But the idea that because I'm a hardline atheist, I can't be altruistic is ridiculous. A theist is going to be always motivated to behave with the ultimate goal of an afterlife reward in the back of his mind, at least subconsciously at all times. So how can you be acting altruistically as a theist when you're always thinking about the reward at the end? A theist would never say, I would be willing to make a morally correct choice even if I went to hell for it. I would never be willing to say, I would be willing to sacrifice my soul and go to hell for eternity to do a good thing. Because it's always based on heaven for them. And it's understandable if you throw out the idea of heaven and hell, infinite reward, infinite punishment for infinite time. It can scare a lot of people into thinking, well, even if it's not very likely, it's Pascal's wager, and that's also a false dichotomy. But I'll get back to that. Now, the false dichotomy actually goes back to Pascal's wager. The real false dichotomy between atheism and theism is the idea that you have to choose between being an atheist and a theist, and the wager that you have to make is it worth it to not believe, and you'd possibly have an infinite punishment for infinite time, or would you want to believe and have infinite reward for infinite time And if you're looking at it like a gambler, even if the likelihood, especially since the punishment for believing, if it's not true, nothing happens. There's no different outcome. You can graph it and you can show it in a little box, but as a gambler, you'd always pick, no matter how low the probability of God's existing, you would always pick to believe, because if God doesn't exist, it doesn't matter anyway, and if he does exist, you get the reward. That's the false dichotomy, because it assumes that your only two choices are to believe in a God that's going to reward you, or not to believe in a God that's going to reward you. But you don't know, first of all, even if there is a God, if there's an afterlife, if he rewards faith, and if the God you're believing in is the real God. Because you could believe in that God, but it could be another God. It could be that God rewards Mormonism, or he rewards Islam, or he could reward the millions of different religions that have existed over the course of mankind. So you're not really picking between just atheism and theism, because all these different religions claim that it's their version of God that you have to believe in. So you're picking between, you wouldn't just be picking one choice that believing in God would guarantee you a reward in the afterlife. You're choosing between tons. And between all these different versions of God that you have to choose to believe from, you also have the idea that, well, maybe God doesn't reward faith and belief. Maybe God rewards good acts, and in which case atheists would still get into heaven. Maybe God rewards all kinds of crazy stuff. Who knows what God would reward? The idea is that I don't believe in God, but the idea that there's only two choices, no God or God that's going to reward faith, that's the false dichotomy, not this altruistic God, not altruistic atheists and hardline atheists. I'm altruistic and hardline. I don't believe there's any reward or punishment in the afterlife, and I still act morally, and I still act ethically. So that's the real false dichotomy. And I didn't plan this response at all. I saw the video and I went straight to my webcam, and I'm just rambling, and I'm sure I am going nowhere with this, because I didn't outline my thoughts or anything. I just started talking. So I'm going to cut myself off right now, and I'm sure I'll think of more things to say, and I might add another response. Have a good day.